Okay, welcome back. We are now in Senior English B, and we are going to now make our first introductory comments on Wordsworth and the first generation poets. I think I said to you earlier that the Romantic poets divide into two generations, the first generation and the second generation. We sometimes think of the first generation as the old farts, and the most important representative of that tradition is Wordsworth. So now we're going to approach Wordsworth, and we're going to try to give some explanation as to what makes this cat now so important for us. Mr. Lang, let's kind of point out for your notes on your little timeline, if you want to think of it this way, that over the course of the year, there will be some big gun names, not unlike last year as juniors when, for example, we met Whitman and Thoreau and Emerson and Jefferson. And, you know, there were like big names, and then there were these other writers that we kind of consider second-tier names. The same will be true this year. We'll meet Chaucer, we'll meet Shakespeare, and so on. And we will claim these names as the big gun names. And truly, Wordsworth is one of our first major big guns for our time together. Now remember, we're working halfway through the chronology or the history or the timeline of British literature. We are in the year, let's go ahead and write it now, 1800. Question, Mr. McGee, I'm taking in-class notes, which means I'm working in blue or black ink, correct? That's right. Where should I be taking these notes? You ought to be taking these notes on pages, the notes that you took, on pages 780 to 783. That's where you should be working, 780 to 783. The other place you could be taking these notes would be on some of the, if you did it, you know, the history reading at the beginning of the Romantics. But I would prefer that you're taking these notes on your bullet point notes of 780 to 783. And you also want to have out your pre-class notes for the annotations for The World is Too Much With Us, an annotation that you should have already made from page 791, okay? So that's kind of where I'll be. I'll be moving back and forth. Now, who is this Wordsworth cat and why should I care about him? It's a really important question. We're going to go with the year 1800. It's a nice working round date. In 1800, a poet and his friend. Wordsworth is the poet. His friend is who? Does anyone know? Who is his close friend that factors so heavily and important in the life of Wordsworth? We're already practicing how to say some of these names. Anyone know how to say it? Starts with a C. What's his name? Coleridge. Very good. Coleridge. Wordsworth and Coleridge publish a small book of poems. Does anyone know what they name that book of poetry? That becomes, many argue, one of the single most important books of poetry ever written. What do they call it? Does anyone know? Lyrical ballads. Outstanding. Outstanding, Mr. Harder. Lyrical ballads. Now, the word lyrical comes from our word that we know of as lyric. And you know that term if you play around with music at all. There's the music of the song, but then there's also the lyrics of the song. Lyric simply means a kind of poetry, usually short, as opposed to, for example, epic poetry that's way long in narrative and all of that. A ballad is another word for song or poem. Okay? So this thing gets published, and right away, there is huge debate about whether it's poetry or not. Mr. Judice, I'm reminded, and this, I'm sorry, will date me, but I'm reminded of that morning in room 303 when I heard two students having a fight verbally. It wasn't a bad fight, but they were fighting back and forth, and I heard one of the students say, "Dude, it's not music." And the other student said, "It is music, but it's different music." And the other kid came back and said, "I don't know what you think. It's like somebody scratching their fingers on the blackboard. It ain't music." Well, of course, I was interested to know because I overheard them saying this. I said, what are you talking about, music versus not? Oh, one of the students says, oh, it's just this new CD that was just released by this new band called Nirvana, and they've released a new CD, and it's not music. And the other kid goes, listen, I'm telling you, someday that's going to be famous music. And the other kid, I remember vividly, standing right in the back of the room, right before the bell rang. The other kid laughed at him and said, man, you are on serious dope. Well, of course, today, two observations. One of those students was right, and the other one was wrong. Would you agree with me? But let's point out something really important about the movement of that band Nirvana that happened roughly right about the time of your birth or so, correct? Of course, ironically, today, Nirvana's played in elevators. Go figure, it's the essence of the way music changes, right? Today, most of you don't see that music as that radical. For the time it was published, it was radical music. And when Cobain, the lead singer of this band, was asked to explain the music, he grew immediately frustrated, really frustrated. He would say things like, if you don't get it, I can't explain it to you. Smells Like Teen Spirit becomes, of course, an instant phenom of a song, but only among a very, very small group of people. Teens. They're the ones who get it. Adults find this music repellent in every way. They don't like the sound of it. They don't like the rhythms of it. And quite frankly, a lot of conservatives consider it dangerous music. It's a suggestion in music to try and do violence and commit terrible things and blah, blah, blah. Cobain himself never wanted to explain what really was going on in his music. Ultimately, some argue, it's what drove him to suicide. He grew tired of constantly being asked to define and redefine who and what he was. He simply said, I do what I do. I don't want to explain it, I just want to play it and make the music. Of course, he didn't like the interviews that he had to do. He loathed the interviews because he knew sooner or later it was going to get around to, can you explain to me why, blah, 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 blah. And he grew tired of it. Now I can make the extension of my allusion, my metaphor, my allegory. Wordsworth is kind of going to be like Nirvana in this regards. When he publishes lyrical ballads, this collection of poems, there are large numbers of people who argue it's not poetry. It's not poetry. Poems are supposed to be kind of these really important, lofty kinds of writing. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began? So is it now I am a man? So be it when I shall grow older, let me die. I'm sorry, that's one of the poems that appeared in lyrical ballads. I'm sorry, important writers of the era said, that's not poetry. That's something a child would throw together in kindergarten maybe. Like we might say today, roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet and so are you. That ain't poetry. Poetry demands a certain kind of length and power and all these other kinds of things. Wordsworth, however, unlike Cobain, this is huge for my observation. Wordsworth, unlike Cobain, he decides to explain what's going on, or he tries to. What happens is the original edition of lyrical ballads sells out really fast. There aren't very many of them that they print. By the way, if you have a copy of an original copy of lyrical ballads today, it's valued into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even sometimes $1 million and beyond. If you have an original copy of lyrical ballads, there aren't very many of them that were released. So he re-releases this thing in 1802, and when he re-releases lyrical ballads, it had all the same poems in it. He includes an essay in this collection of poetry. He writes a little essay. This essay attempts to explain what it is he's doing in this book of poetry, along with Coleridge. This essay becomes really important. Some have argued the essay becomes more important than the poems. Why? Because in the essay, he lays the groundwork for all future poetry. And what is it that he says? Well, let's say it out loud. A couple of really important things. One, this poetry is new. It is different. He comes right out and says it. He says, while I'm working in traditions of the past, I am leaving those traditions, not unlike what Cobain said. It wasn't that Cobain really hated the Beatles when he said his comments about them. It was just that he was saying that's of a different time. He didn't deny that you have to have the Beatles to have him. He didn't deny that. He was just saying, I'm leaving it. I'm going beyond it. In some ways, John Lennon had been just as radical, right, 40 years earlier, right? Okay, it was a different time, you see, all right? Cobain himself arguing something new. And Wordsworth will say this. New in what way? Number 2. Well, there were several things, and these are sometimes called the primary principles of lyrical ballads. And they're framed out of this essay. I'll just summarize a few of them for your notes. 1, he said, I want to write poetry in language that's easy to understand. You'd have to be quasi-moronic to not know what it means. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. I get really happy when I see a rainbow. So was it when my life began. I was happy about rainbows when I was young. So is it now I am a man. I'm still happy about rainbows. So be it when I shall grow old or let me die. If I ever come to a point in my life where I'm not jazzed about rainbows, I hope I die. That is as simple a language as you're going to find in poetry. And that, Wordsworth said, is by design. He said, I want to use language for the common man because here's why. Next point. I want common people to read my poems. Up to this point, poetry had been about kind of upper-class, well-educated people. Wordsworth wanted to write poetry that could be read by everybody and appreciated by everybody. So, number 3, he's going to write about subjects that are really simple and common. He's going to write a lot about nature. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. Notice that in the poems that we have in your book, a number of them are about nature. He'll write poems about flowers and rainbows and woods and rivers and on it goes. Right? Why? Because he wants to capture emotions, what he called, this is a direct quote, emotions recollected in tranquility. I put that note in my annotations if I were you. It's possible it ends up on the exam. It's a really important line. Emotions, he wants to try and find a way to capture emotions recollected in tranquility. In other words, you go out, for example, I'm not saying this ever happens, into the Badlands in the middle of the night, flying in your pickup truck across the Badlands, turning the lights off. Why anyone would do this, we will not speculate. And the adrenaline rush is intense, right? Okay? Somehow or another, you live through this, broken, teeth and all. And, and you come to to back home, sitting in the comfort of your bedroom, right? Nursing your broken jaw, or any number of other body parts we won't get into because we don't want to make anybody sad in here, you see. Finally, you decide to think about the experience. You had the experience, now you're going to recollect the experience in tranquility, back when you're in your bedroom all relaxed. And this is exactly what Wordsworth says. He says, I want to have powerful experiences, and then I want to inject those into lines of poetry after I've had the experience kind of in a comfortable setting. And then other people will read those, and immediately they can also experience the experience, if I can say it that way. So in other words, Wordsworth says, my poetry is about experiences that I have that are powerful ones, and then I want to pass those on to a reader who can in some way identify with the experience. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. In other words, oh yeah, that's happened to me as well. Maybe the last time you can remember really being jazzed by a rainbow, or, important, not being jazzed by a rainbow. That is to say, what? Rainbows, what is wrong with you? Are you kind of, bingo. All of a sudden we've caught the romantic intuition. If you ever get to the point where you no longer see rainbows, dude, you are living far too busy a life. This is what he would say. Something's wrong with your life if you can't enjoy rainbows. Something, you've grown up so much that you no longer possess the heart of a child. And that, for Wordsworth, is tragic. Okay, tragic. He thinks that you've lost something in that moment. Finally, Wordsworth, and I like to say it this way about all the romantics, Wordsworth lays the groundwork. They're going to move from the very, very simple to the pretty complex. This little poem, My Heart Leaps Up When I Behold a Rainbow in the Sky, there are whole books written on this poem. Hundreds of pages of a book written on this poem. But it ain't the first 5 lines that book's written on. It's the last 2 lines. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. The child is father. We were playing this game already about Harder and his father. We get it that Harder has a dad, and the dad is the dad to Harder. But what if we were to say, no, 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 that's all wrong. Harder's father is not the father. Harder is the father, but not to his child. Harder is the father to his dad. Inverse. Well, now our first instincts are like, that's some seriously screwed up chemistry. No, 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 you don't understand. He's not talking physically the child is father of the man. Biologically, we get it. You came, obviously, from two older people than you hooking up and exchanging fluids. We know that. That's not the question or the point. The point is rather, what happens emotionally, spiritually, psychologically? How does a child raise an adult? Well, this is going to be a very philosophical. Notice that's moving from a very simple kind of position to a pretty complex philosophic. So, for the last thing for your notes, these poems are going to have both simplicity, but they're also going to have a certain kind of complexity, a philosophic complexity. In what ways is Harder a father to his father? You know, how does that work? Okay. Of course, we've pointed this out before, and it's absolutely true. Your parents changed your diapers. Someday you will change theirs. Now that may gross some of you out. Uh-oh, insight. That may gross some of you out, but that's only because you haven't thought about it. What, you think they're going to live forever? Well, no, I guess that's true. Oh, right. So if they don't die in a car wreck today, that means they're going to get older. And the older they get, what happens to the body? Well, we know that what happens to the body. You stay old long enough, anybody, and you become childlike again physically. Functions stop working. Things start changing. That is the truth. That is the way it is, right? Who's going to take care of those people when they finally cannot take care of themselves? All of a sudden, you will become the father to your parent. The afternoon you have to say, Dad, I love you, but I'm sorry, dude, you're not going to drive anymore. I'm sorry. It's over. You can't do it. If you need to go somewhere, I've got to do it for you. You can't do it anymore. And in that moment, you've caught the insight of the philosophic complexity of this poem, The Child is Father of the Man. It's there. You're there. Or, even more intriguing, someday, when your own son or daughter, the one you raised, will look at you and say, Ma, honey, I love you, but you can't drive anymore. It's done. You're too old. And in that insight, in that moment, you go, wait, you can't tell me. I tell you, I'm the mom. And your daughter looks at you at the age of 50 and goes, yeah, honey, I know that, but you can't do it anymore. You're going to hit some poor child on a bike. You can't do it. If you need help, right? You need help. You come and you get me, I help you. Right? And it's in that moment, strangely enough, it's in that moment that you come full circle. Now all of a sudden you ain't the parent anymore. Your daughter's the parent. And you get to go, but I don't want to not drive. Which kind of sounds like, I want to go to the park and not leave. Now, hello? It is natural. Can I say this without insult? It is natural that an observation like this would upset us. Because for most of us, on a Tuesday morning that's acting kind of like a Monday morning, we don't think about stuff like this. Dude, we are just concentrating on whether we got our packets in or not and we're going to graduate. Wordsworth says, oh, I know. But there was a time when you didn't know about packets. All you cared about was rainbows and sandboxes. The child is father of the man. There was a time. But it's changed. Now we're all grown up. And unfortunately, as we grow up, there's things we lose. Like the ability to live your day with piety. What is piety? See, now all of a sudden we're back to another interesting philosophic view. Children seem to be able to live their lives with a certain kind of joy that seems to go away as we age. Do you notice how much more alive in some way these freshmen seem than you? They got all this energy. I remember last year a senior saying this, these freshmen are driving me nuts. They have too much energy. They need to just calm down. Of course, it was ironic because I had taught that student as a freshman 4 years early, and I said, yeah, it's funny how 4 years can sap the energy right out of a guy. Right? Because 4 years ago, you were that guy, bopping around all over the place, driving everybody else nuts. when you're a kid, see, think about it. When you're a kid, you don't get it. It's interesting for me to lecture a number of you in your senior year when I lectured you in your freshman year, and I remember, right in a single moment, I remember the energy you brought in the first year. Now we're seniors. We come dragging our cans into this room in the morning going, oh man, you got, right? Freshmen, totally different. Just walk the halls. You always know where the freshmen are congregating by the noise level. Am I right or wrong? Walk the halls. The senior hall, subdued in the morning. Everyone's trying to coffee up, find their way. The freshmen, bing, ready to go. Bang, 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 right? Yay, we're back at school again. What happened over the weekend? Blah, 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 blah. Right? Seniors are just like, the same thing happened last weekend that happened for 3 years of weekends. It does not matter. It's all called lost drama. Who cares? Right? See? You're already old farts. It's already... Question, what will you be like in 20 years? See? Somebody go, oh, right? See how this works? Okay? This is the point of a little poem. Oh, wait. Hello? 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 Those simple little lines, my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky, allowed me to make observations for the last 5 or 6 minutes that are interestingly profound if you can at all think about them. Wow, I guess I never really thought about that. There is a difference between the halls of juniors or freshmen and seniors. Yeah, you're right about that. And of course, it all begins again for those of us who are so giddy about the idea of graduating so we can go on and do something else. We become freshmen all over again. Yay, we get to go out to lunch. Yay, I get to leave my parents' house and live all on my own in a dorm. Yay, right? Talk to a college senior, or even better, a graduate who's graduated from college, and they're like, yeah, right. Hey, pal, it was a whole lot easier when you lived at home. All you had to do is take care of it. Those of us who have already moved out, we're not living with people, we've got to take care of ourselves. We know this is true. It radically changes already. It kind of forces you to have to grow up in ways you get to enjoy as a kid, where you just kind of went to the icebox and you never had to ask who put food in there. It was just there. Ma, why don't we have more to eat? You need to go to the grocery shopping. When you live alone, you laugh at an observation like that. Yeah, grocery shopping is called being done by you, and it costs money. Which means you don't just walk the aisles and pick up anything you want, throw it in the cart. Now all of a sudden you got to see how that works. The child is father of the man. And I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. He says, I want to live my life in such a way that there's a certain kind of, well, we'll use the language, romantic intuition. Let's talk about what that is now. Let's talk about Wordsworth now as a poet. What is it that Wordsworth is so, what's his agenda? What's he so upset about? This is a good way to ask it, okay? So let's start there. Wordsworth is concerned, I'm going to say this, then I'll define it. Wordsworth is concerned that something is being lost in 1800. Wordsworth is concerned that something is being lost by the English people. What? Like what? Like lost? Like I lost my keys? Lost? Kind of, but different. Not physically something being lost, but culturally, emotionally, spiritually, something being lost. And he will lay the blame at the feet of what we will call the Industrial Revolution. Now, what is that? The Industrial Revolution is when people started using machines to do labor that had usually been done manually. And in the process, malls got invented. You know those wretched places where all the stores are, the fountain in the middle? Oh. Oh. Right? And you got to go there, and while people actually shop, you get to kind of sit and watch the insanity, that. You're right. Okay, malls. Are you familiar with malls? Okay, malls. I mean, I realize we don't have one in our town, but I'm going to work off the assumption that you know what I mean when I talk about that wretched hole called a mall. Okay. Okay. Dante never knew about malls, or he would have never gone any further than that to describe Inferno. That would have been enough for him. The halls of the malls. It would have been enough. You don't have to go any further into hell than that. Right?
Well, we all know Mr. McGee went shopping with his family.
Well, I tried not to. So, Wordsworth has a great concern about malls, and here's why. He says, malls start to change the way you think about the world, the way you think about life. Malls. I'm obviously, I think you're sophisticated enough to understand. I'm using the term mall to represent a certain kind of idea. Let's listen to Wordsworth say it on 791. So that's where you should be. Notice how he begins. The world is too much with us late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We've given our hearts away. A sordid boon. Now, these are radical lines for 1800. They're still radical lines today if you can allow yourself to see and hear anything of what he's saying. Let's exegete, shall we? Let's work through these lines in your notes and try and figure out what he's saying. Notice the first line. The world is too much with us, late and soon. And we want to write down the word world, and we want to provide a definition. The world is too much with us, late and soon. By the way, is he saying, Mr. Lang, yay, about this fact, yay, the world is too much? Or is he saying it more like this? What do you guess? Is it a good thing that the world is too much with us late and soon? Or is it a bad thing that the world is too much with us? See, you gotta figure out, right, Chris Nicholas goes like this. Yeah, that's right. That's this right here. In other words, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Wordsworth is going to say, there is something fundamentally wrong with the world I'm living in, and it begins with this. The world is too much with us late and soon. What world? The world of trees? The world of rainbows? The world of flowers? Look at the second line. Getting and spending. We lay waste our powers. Malls. Malls. That's his problem. Malls. Why? Line 3. Little we see in nature that is ours. Ah, now all of a sudden we understand. Wordsworth is going to juxtapose or compare two things. Malls and the park. Malls and the park. Getting and spending versus nature. And look what he says about malls. You can spend so much time in malls that you actually begin to think it's real. That it's real. All those people plastered in those pictures, right? When you walk by, for example, the Victoria's Secret model or something, you can begin to think that's all real. Of course, Victoria's Secret models are the first one to tell you off the record, none of that's real. First of all, that ain't the way we really look in real form. None of that's real. And even if it is, just for a few days, they ain't no 70-year-old Victoria's Secret models on them windows.
You're gonna make Tyler cry.
Let's just kind of point this out, right? Sad but true. Here's the point. Look at the next line. We've given our hearts away. Whoa. Not familiar with those really bad kung fu movies where the guy reaches inside of the chest of his opponent and pulls out his heart. I get that. You know, those really bad shows. I get that. But what's up with this, we've given our hearts away? I mean, he clearly doesn't mean that we've reached inside of our chest, found that beating muscle, pulled it out of our rib cage and handed it to... No, that's a literal interpretation. Clearly, he's not speaking literally. He's speaking, are you ready for your notes at 2B? He's speaking figuratively or metaphorically. We've given our hearts away. What does that mean? Write that down. How do you give your heart away? By the way, he calls it a sordid, that means bad, boon, that means bad. In other words, let's point it out. Something is wrong with us. Something is wrong with us, he says, in 1800. I've had students who say, whoa, once I understand this poem, I never can walk in a mall the same way. That's the whole point. That's what Wordsworth wants you to do. He wants you to walk into the mall, and he wants you to be aware something is wrong when people begin to think this is real. It's something's fundamentally wrong, right? What is wrong? Well, we'll go back now and see. Now that we've unpacked it, we can put it back together and then look at it again. The world is too much with us late and soon. getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. What Tracy Chapman will call in his famous song, mountains and mountains of stuff. Stuff we don't need, but stuff for whatever reason we think matters to us. Stuff we think we need to acquire. Stuff that we start to think is real. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll work with Tintern Abbey as we continue to play this game of what's real and what's not. Thank you. Make sure you read.